Since the time I was a young adult, really returning to and entering more deeply into our Catholic faith, today's second reading, taken from the 12th chapter of St. Paul's letter to the Romans, verses 1 and 2, has always been one of my clear favorites in all of the sacred scriptures. It says everything. And it gives us some kind of insight, into the sheer intelligence of St. Paul and his ability to grasp, otherwise very complicated subjects and condense them into just a few elegant words, a few elegant concepts that we can ground ourselves on. And those two verses from the 12th chapter of his letter to the Romans, they're extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I don't know what you could add to them that would change, their effect, their impact. And what he does, in these two verses is he gives us Christ's cost of discipleship, which we heard in today's gospel. Well, according to St. Matthew, if you wish to be my disciple, you need to deny yourself. Take up your cross each day and follow me. And St. Paul basically gives us this invitation, but under a different aspect. He tells us essentially, what it looks like, what it consists of. I'm not going to go in order, but St. Paul tells us that for one thing, we need to be transformed by a complete renewal of our mind. To be completely transformed. It says, do not conform yourself to this age. Do not. But rather be transformed in your way of thinking. I cannot help, and nor am I going to resist saying out loud, if St. Paul were alive today, what would he say about TikTok? Social media in general? The media, cable, network news? What would St. Paul have to say about these things? And the effect that it's having on the believers in Jesus Christ? I mean, can any of you, honestly say that, after a 2-hour marathon session on TikTok, I feel so refreshed? No, you don't. You're exhausted. You're exhausted. And somewhere way deep down inside, you hate yourself because those 2 hours you can never get back. Ever. One of the things I find amusing, and it hasn't been here in Polson, but it's in previous assignments. I've had people tell me, they're like, but Father, we have to watch the news. We need to know what's going on in the world. And it's like, do you? Do you need to know what is going on in the world? So let me say two things on that front. Let me say two things. The first thing is, how were the lives of 15th century Hungarian peasants diminished by not knowing anything about the affairs of the Aztecs? Please. And if somebody would care to, immediately after Mass, when we're feasting on hot dogs and brownie sundaes, please come up and share with me how your life, and it must be in a concrete way, how your life has been improved, enriched because you think you understand the nature of the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. If you can answer these two questions for me, then I'll concede the point and say, yep, okay, you're right. We should know something about the world in which we live. But I also think you know the point I'm trying to make. There is a legitimate use of the media, and there is also a destructive one. And you know I am always addressing myself to the destructive one. And why do I hate these things so much? Because of what they do to you. Because of what they do to you. Makes me hate them. So I never tire of talking about it. There are good things. There are good things we can make use of. There are good things we ought to make use of. But not to the destruction of our mind and the filth we allow in that seeps its way into our heart, and what it does to our faith, what it does to our hope, what it does to our ability to truly love as we have been loved by God. Why did God give us an intellect? So that we might seek and receive the truth. When we bathe our intellect in things that are true, things that are good, things that are beautiful, we're edified. And we're given hope. We are given hope. And so we need to take St. Paul's admonition deadly seriously. Are we, by our use of media, conforming ourselves to the thinking of this world? Or do we use it in such a destructive way that we have no idea what is on God's mind? Disabled, unable to discern and know His will. St. Paul tells us that our daily lives need to be a daily bodily sacrifice. Well, what does he mean by that? How do we live a daily bodily sacrifice? Well, it's precisely as Jesus Christ said, to deny ourselves. That each day we must make some effort to resist sin. I think that's clear. I think one of the things that isn't perfectly clear is that it is a matter of Catholic truth and doctrine that God gives every baptized soul the grace necessary to avoid committing mortal sin. That is a fact of our Catholic faith. That is a fact. And building on that, we can also say we have the grace to never deliberately commit one venial sin. We know it's wrong. So why do we do it anyway? What do we think we're going to achieve? What are we hoping to accomplish? Right? And so in resisting temptation to sin, and asking God each day for the grace never to deliberately, willfully commit a sin, now we're at least prepared for the daily adversities. For all the daily adversities that will confront us. Big ones, little ones, it doesn't matter. And all of these God provides to us so that we have an opportunity to practice virtue. So you lay aside sin so that you can greet the day's adversities with God's grace. and advance in the practice of virtue. That is what a daily bodily sacrifice consists of. But it certainly cannot take place without a transformation of our mind and our way of thinking. But see, here's what's really interesting. Here's what St. Paul does with all this. He calls this the transformation of our mind, the living of a daily bodily sacrifice. He calls it our spiritual worship. It's our spiritual worship. Oh, what does he mean by that? Well, it's very, very difficult, to get it across in an English translation. But the sense, of the Greek that St. Paul is using is that these things constitute the worship of God in a manner that is fitting a thinking being. That's what he's saying, spiritual worship. That's the essence of the meaning of spiritual worship. A worship that is worthy of a thinking being. Do you see why the transformation of our mind is so important? And what is he saying in all of this? Well, because we know that all creation worships God. All creation. I mean, you walk out that door, and if you have the eyes to see it, what we behold is a symphony. This beautiful symphony, a hymn of praise to God the Creator. Every single creature that he has made glorifies him. And it's beautiful. And God is glorified in it. But see, here's the difference. Here's the difference between nature and intelligent humanity. Just that. Nature doesn't have intelligence. It doesn't have rationality. But we have the one thing that is so precious and so often misused. Is it because we're created in the image and likeness of God, and in keeping with our dignity, God has given us our freedom. Freedom. And so we can choose to enter into that hymn or not. When Jesus Christ became man, he did so for a variety of reasons. And among those reasons were to reveal the love of God the Father to the human race. And that he did in an exemplary fashion. That goes without saying. But also in the flesh, Jesus Christ revealed us to ourselves. He has given us the only authentic interpretation and revelation of what it means to be human. You want to know what it looks like to be human? You look at and you study Jesus Christ. And not to study him as an object of curiosity, but as a friend with whom you enjoy great intimacy. Because it comes down to how we use our freedom, right? And that's what St. Paul, I think, underneath it all, if you're getting the subtext, it's how we make use of our freedom. Are we going to enter into the great hymn of creation in which God is glorified? Or are we going to excuse ourselves and bow out?